Okay, well, thanks again for showing up today. Today we're going to talk about the topic of standards of the buyers that you're actually working with. I know that in this marketplace, buyers make up usually over half of what it is that you're doing. And so one of the things that's important to do when you're dealing with buyers is to make sure that you don't waste your time. So today we're going to talk about buyer standards that Mike talks about, okay? The first thing that Mike says when you're dealing with buyers is, number one, you have to work with only AAA buyers, okay? Mike calls those AAA buyers, those are the people who are sellers who have either sold and need to move now, okay? Those are past clients, center of influence, or even those maybe who are direct referrals to you, okay, from other Mike Ferry agents. See, the thing is, sign calls and a lot of the ad calls and things like that that you're receiving, floor time, whatever it is you're doing to get buyers, a lot of times they can be of varying quality. So you want to make sure that the people that you're dealing with can actually do something. And so the ones that will give you the best return on your time here are going to be the AAA buyers, which are the sellers that you have, past clients, and again, the direct referrals. The next thing Mike says is, number two, you want to make sure that you work with buyers who have to buy now. That's kind of important. Somebody who's got to buy now, who has a high level of motivation. You see, just like a seller, all right, you would not spend any time at all with a seller who's deciding to go ahead and sell their home for some unknown reason. You'd want to know before you walked through the door what it is you were doing there in the first place so that you made sure that you didn't waste your time. So Mike says it's the same thing with buyers. We need to find somebody who needs to buy now. So an example of that would be somebody whose lease is running up, who's going to have to move here in the next month or so because their lease is about out. A high level of motivation would be someone who's moving to the area for a job transfer or something along those lines. So it's really important, Mike says, to get to that level of motivation quickly during your initial interview. The next thing Mike says is that you want to go ahead and make sure that you work with buyers who've been pre-qualified. See, the biggest problem I think that we have as real estate agents is we operate off a level of scarcity. We hope and we pray that the phone will ring, so when the phone goes, we hop in the car and we drive off and we pray that we can make a sale. But the problem is that you can see, Mike tells this story one time about these people who are agents, and the guy calls up and says he wants to go see a property, and it's $1 million property, and Mike says, that's great, I can't wait. Jumps in the car, picks the people up, takes them over, shows them a house, and says, so guys, what sort of thing do you do? The guy says, well, I work at McDonald's. And then Mike says, okay, so are you the owner of maybe McDonald's or a franchise or something? Oh no, I'm a fry cook. So the question is, well, why in the world are you looking at $1 million houses if you're a fry cook? Well, because I'd like to see what they're like and maybe one day move into one. Now, Mike's not saying that he actually did this, but what Mike brought up, the point was that you want to make sure that the people you're dealing with are pre-qualified enough that they can actually make that move. Because we tend to go ahead and forget that all-important step because we're afraid we will lose a buyer. Look, you can't lose something you don't have. So if that buyer calls you up and wants to see something, have them have a hoop that they need to jump through to make sure that you can go ahead and do something that's going to be of value. Number four, Mike says that make sure that all the decision makers are present. So when you're showing property, make sure that all the decision makers are present, okay? Because number four, all decision makers when you're doing your listing presentation, you'd want to make sure that the husband and the wife are there so that when you make your presentation, they can't slough it off to the other person and say, well, I'll talk to my husband or I'll talk to my wife about it and we'll get back with you. You wouldn't want that to happen there. And it's the same scenario when you're showing a home. If they see that house, okay, there's going to be somebody else that makes that decision too. And the big thing is, if you're showing a property to, say, Mrs. Buyer, and Mrs. Buyer likes it, and she says, well, I'll go talk to my husband about it, and then we'll go bring him back when he gets off work or something along those lines. The problem is that in this market, especially with the values being so low what they are and the interest rates being incredibly low, chances are if it's a really good house, it's going to be gone by the time Mr. Seller finds out about it. And you would have wasted your time as well as theirs. So make sure that if there's anybody that they're going to talk to, whether it be their mom, their dad, their uncle, their husband, their brother, the witch doctor, whatever it is, try and make sure that all the decision makers are present, because it'll make your life a whole lot easier. Number 5, Mike says, look, work only with buyers who are realistic. Make sure the buyers are realistic, okay, in their expectations. We've all heard that expression, you know, we will have a champagne dreams on a beer budget. And the thing is that with buyers, another saying is equally appropriate when we say that sellers want prices like they were in 2005. And buyers want prices like they were in 1925. You see, the problem is that we tend to think as a buyer, okay, they think they can come in and offer pennies on the dollar. And the problem is that most sellers are not in that situation where they will give it up like that. A lot of times they'll want to go ahead and come in and ask for a pool, a spa, a sitting room, a study, a living room, stainless steel, granite countertops in the foothills, and they'd like to have all of that with 1,700 square feet under $150,000. Here in Tucson, that's not realistic. And if you're coming across a person like that, and you know who they are, then it's probably not a good idea to waste your time with that. You may want to send it to somebody who maybe has a little bit more time than you. Number 6, you want to make sure that the person you're dealing with is receptive, okay? Receptive and cooperative. It really is true that the buyers that you're dealing with, okay, it's like a marriage. It has to be a scenario where it starts out good because it doesn't get any better. You got to think about it this way. Look, is the person I'm dealing with now somebody I'm going to want to have in my center of influence for the next 5, 10, 15 years? And if the answer is no, because they're a jerk or whatever, then you got to ask yourself, do I really want to deal with this person? Because, look, if you write an offer on a property and the seller counteroffers, you need to be able to get a hold of that buyer quickly so you can go ahead and negotiate this deal. They need to be cooperative, meaning that they need to call you back when you tell them to. They need to be able to show up at the inspection. They need to be able to go ahead and take some of your advice. Doesn't mean that they'll always listen to you, but it does mean that they're at least willing to listen. So make sure that they're receptive and cooperative. That'll make your life a whole lot easier too. Number 7, work with buyers in your service area. Work with buyers in your area. Now, that sounds like a pretty basic thing, but it's really true. When you think about it, how many agents do we know in Tucson have people from Phoenix come down here to go ahead, work with buyers, and try to get cooperation with our agents here in town? You see, likewise, when we have buyers who live in, say, Phoenix, you know, if you're not familiar with that marketplace, you're not only going to be spending a lot of time driving back and forth, but you're also going to be not servicing your buyer very well. So make sure that you service that buyer in an area that is comfortable with you and an area that you're going to be able to service well, and it won't take forever to go ahead and do something. Okay? The next, work with buyers, okay, who will meet you in your office. Why is that? Okay, well, the biggest thing is that when you're dealing with the buyer and you tell that buyer, hey, look, I want you to meet me in my office. You know, the old phrase, cito, come into the office, okay? The purpose for this whole exercise is to try to get them to jump through that hoop. We've already talked about jumping through the hoop to go ahead and come into the office to get pre-qualified through the lender. We also talked about them to go ahead and get pre-qualified and then come to meet you to be pre-qualified through you to make sure that you can get them what they say that they want. If they won't come here, if they won't come into your office and they insist on meeting you someplace else, then you have to ask your question, who's in control? Because at the end of the day, somebody's going to be in control. Either you're going to be in control or the buyer's going to be in control. And if you're going to be making money, then you got to have a standard that says, I'm only going to work with people who will meet me in my office. Okay? The next thing, never show more than 3 homes at a time. Never do it. If you've been in the business for longer than a couple days, you probably have seen the tours that either the company will hold or the MLS will hold. And what we tend to do is we tend to, on these tours, go see a whole bunch of different homes in a very short period of time. And if you're like me, you've been through these and you've only been there about the 4th house through, you're starting to be a little fuzzy as to who's who. And by the time you're done, 7, 8, 9 houses later, hey, they're all a big mystery to you. And you're in the real estate business. How can we expect a buyer then who doesn't do this to pay attention for the time span it takes? So never show more. Never show more than 3 homes at a time. Okay? For a couple big reasons. Number one, they will remember the homes that you're talking about. Okay? Yeah, do you remember that one house, the one that was pink, that had the trim? Yeah, and what about that house over there that had the pool in the backyard? And what about that one with the stainless steel cabinets? You know, they're going to remember very clearly which ones they're talking about. And that will make it crystal clear for them. The second advantage to this is it will control your time. Okay? Because if you're going to be showing property, it's really, really, really easy to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours in a day showing property. And that will kill your ability to go ahead and do the paperwork that is required for the other deals that you have, to prospect for new buyers and sellers, to go ahead and talk with your current clients, and to do all the other things that are required of your business. So never show more than 3 homes at a time. That way you can manage your time. And then make sure that you ask them to buy. That's like really important. So make sure you do that. Number 10, and the final thing Mike says, is strongly, strongly, strongly consider having a buyer broker signed. I can't tell you how many homes I've sold personally from an agent who did not have a buyer broker signed. The way that this typically goes, as a matter of fact, this happened Friday. The way that this typically happens is a buyer will be driving along down the street. They will see one of our signs. They'll be interested. They'll call up. The conversation goes something along this line. You know, hi, my name's Karl, Realty Executives. You know, we start asking a couple questions, and then we find out, we say, well, are you working with a realtor at this time? Well, yeah, or well, no, you know, this or that. Well, that's interesting. I'm curious. Why did you decide to call me as opposed to calling your realtor? Well, you know, our realtor wasn't around, or we can't get a hold of our realtor, or something along those lines. And then it's really easy to go ahead and pick off that client. If they don't have a buyer broker agreement signed, guess what? Your client is making a mortgage payment for me, not for you. If there's an opportunity for me to go ahead and steal your client, I'll do it every time if I can. Because quite frankly, if you don't have the sales skills to get a buyer broker signed, then you don't have the sales skills to list a home. It is no different. You would never consider working on a home that you don't have listed under contract. So why do you even consider working with a buyer without a buyer broker agreement? Anyway, I hope this is of help to you, because the thing about it is you need to take a look at all the leads you have for buyers and ask yourself, do they meet these minimum standards that Mike says is a good place for us to go? And if not, well then what are your standards? And think about that, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.